Hey humans, it's Hannah. So excited to go on this adventure with you today. We are going to dive into tier 2 of the disturbing Wikipedia article Iceberg. I would highly suggest grabbing your favorite beverage for this one because it's going to be a fun and very, very weird ride. If you missed tier 1, I will link that below. I am making this an entire series on my channel going through the disturbing wiki iceberg. We're going to roll to the sponsor of this video, but we will get right into it once I'm back. I am so excited because today's sponsor is Fetch. Fetch is this amazing free app that gives you rewards on stuff that you're already buying. It's this super easy to use app where you scan any receipt, any physical receipt or e-receipt, and you will earn points on every single purchase, even if that receipt is up to 2 weeks old. After you scan, you can redeem these points for hundreds of rewards in the form of gift cards. Some of my favorites available are Amazon, Starbucks, Target, and TJ Maxx, but there are so many to choose from. All you have to do is scan any receipt and you get the points. Scanning a receipt only takes a matter of seconds. It's super user-friendly and just so simple. You can also scan your e-receipts, so you just press the e-receipt button here. There you go. It just gave me points for my most recent Amazon order. I just think since it's completely free and easy to use, Fetch is just one of those things that why not have it in your life? My personal favorite feature about Fetch is their Discover feature. You can browse items that are redeemable for bonus points. So for example, I go to Safeway for groceries a lot anyway. Right now I can get an extra 100 points just for going to Safeway. I just love looking through this section to see if there's anything that I was planning to get anyway so that I can get the bonus points for it. For a limited time, check out the link in the description right below this video and use code HannahTheHorrible or scan the QR code on the screen right now and get an extra 5,000 points when you scan your first receipt. Okay, the first one on our list for this tier 2 is the Green Children of Woolpit Wikipedia page. Back when I was a baby YouTuber and I had very, very few subscribers, I actually made a whole video on this. It was very interesting to research, but nobody's probably seen it because it's such an old video. This one takes place in Suffolk, England, all the way back in the 12th century. The documented story goes that 2 children, a brother and a sister, arrived at the village of Woolpit. They looked completely normal, except they mysteriously had green skin. They spoke a language that nobody in the village understood, and they wouldn't eat any normal food. They finally found fava beans in the village, and then the kids started eating it like ravenously, apparently, because they wouldn't eat any other food. However, eventually the children kind of got used to their environment and they did actually start eating other food, and not surprisingly, the green tinge to their skin went away. They were kind of adopted into the village, and it was decided that they would baptize both the children. Sadly, after the baptism though, the brother passed away. The sister, on the other hand, continued to thrive and was eventually given the name Agnes. She eventually learned English and she was able to tell the villagers where she came from and what her story was. She claimed that she came from a land where the sun never shined and it was twilight all the time. She claimed that it was a place called St. Martin's Land and that everything in that place was green. She also says that she has no idea how they actually got to Woolpit, only that the brother and sister were with their father herding the cattle when they heard a loud sound, and then the 2 of them got lost after following the cattle into a cave, and they ended up in Woolpit. Agnes eventually got married in the village, and by some other accounts, she was kind of a mean person. Of course, so there's many theories out there as to what these children are and where they came from. Of course, many suggest that they're aliens. Some say that the story was probably like roughly true, like some of it was true, but a lot of it was misconstrued through the documentation and just over the years. My personal take on that is that Agnes did not speak English at all, and even if she learned English for several years, she could have perhaps still described things incorrectly. However, if the story is true, the most likely explanation that people have come up with over the years is that they were simply malnourished children, and that's why their skin turned green. And perhaps they were Flemish immigrants who's had parents, but the parents were prosecuted or killed for whatever reason, and so the kids were on their own and wandered into Woolpit. If the story is completely made up, some historians believe that this whole thing is just an allegory for Britons, the indigenous group of people that lived on the land before. So that tells you something. Retained surgical instruments. Retained surgical instruments is the next page. Warning, this one is going to make a lot of people cringe because it's kind of what it sounds like. This is when a patient goes into surgery and one of the instruments used during the surgery is accidentally left in the patient's body. It's preventable and also very underreported. The average surgery apparently uses 250 to 300 instruments, which, if you think about it, makes sense. But if you're not in the medical field, that is wild. Plus, the harder and more complicated and longer the surgery, of course, the more instruments are going to be needed. And with that, the likelihood of mistakes also increases. The most common object left behind, which would not be very surprising, is like a surgical sponge or like the little pieces of gauze. However, it could also be a needle, a piece of a blade, pins, stuff like that. It's very underreported because medical staff are often not encouraged to report it if they know that it happens, because of course it's really bad for the hospital's reputation, as well as the fact that they will likely get sued. But what's really sad is that it can have awful consequences for the patient. They'll likely have to go back in for another surgery if they are informed of it. If they're not, it can cause internal bleeding, obviously infections, and of course in severe cases, death. List of incidents at Walt Disney World. This is also basically exactly what it sounds like. It's a Wikipedia page devoted to a giant list of terrible things that have happened at Disney World in Orlando, Florida. There's incidents in a list divided by categories: Disney Transport, Disney's Animal Kingdom, Disney's Blizzard Beach, Disney's Hollywood Studio, Epcot, ESPN Wide World of Sports Complex, the Magic Kingdom, Disney's Typhoon Lagoon, characters in the resort hotels, Discovery Island, Bay Lake, and Walt Disney World Speedway. Obviously, I'm not going to read all of these to you. The list is quite long, but I will read a couple that stuck out to me. On December 26, 2010, a 69-year-old man died after stepping in front of a moving Disney transportation bus in the parking lot of Disney's Port Orleans Resort. On the Avatar Flight of Passage ride, several instances of visitors losing consciousness on the ride have been reported, leading to the installation of warning cards for riders before entering the ride. The cards are similar to those on Mission Space and warn riders about fear of heights, motion sickness, and the seating restraints. On November 21st, 1984, a husband and a wife, along with their 1-year-old daughter, were killed and 2 other children were injured when a single-engine plane they were flying crashed while attempting an emergency landing in the Epcot parking lot. The Piper aircraft was approaching an empty section of the parking lot when it clipped a light pole, shearing off the right wing and crashing into several parked cars. The family was flying from Greer, South Carolina to Kissimmee, Florida for a Disney World vacation. Devil's Footprints. This one is so weird, and I had actually never heard of this before, and my job revolves around looking up creepy things on the internet. This was an incident from 1855 in East and South Devon, England. On the nights of February 8th and 9th in 1855, and for a few nights afterwards, hoof prints were found in the very heavy, fresh snowfall. It was estimated that the tracks went on for 40 to 100 miles, which is 60 to 160 kilometers. The prints were reported to be all the same size and all about the same distance apart, going in a trail, as if somebody was walking this trail. This trail was reported in over 30 places in the local area. The weirdest part about this is that the footprints appeared on top of obstacles in its path. For example, they would find that the trail would go over house roofs and up on high walls. The hoof prints would even stop right before drain pipes that were 4 inches max in diameter, and then would kind of look like they exited the drain pipes on the other side. The footprints resembled hoofs that would belong to a deer, a pig, or a goat, and so naturally people freaked out and thought if it could belong to a goat, then it must be Satan. However, there's a huge caveat to this story. There's not that much hard evidence that this ever really happened. There's a lot of reports of it without any photos, and the eyewitnesses, as they usually are, were pretty unreliable. Furthermore, it would be very hard to say that the trail went for up to 100 miles, because to follow a trail for 100 miles in one day and or before the snow melted or became messed up is just very unlikely. However, if it is true, some other theories other than paranormal / the Satan theory is that it could have been a kangaroo, it could have been something called hopping mice, badgers, and my favorite is that it was a secret experimental balloon that was dragging something called mooring shackles behind it. Mooring shackles look like this. So I don't know what the answer is, but I do really like that theory because this is what the shackles look like. Out of place artifact, also known as oop art. This is an artifact that is found like extremely out of context, like an artifact that is found that really messes with what we know about history, humans, and the earth. It's something we find that shows possible evidence of humans existing before we believe humans existed, or we find evidence of technology from a time period where, again, that technology did not exist yet. One fun example of this is the Antikythera mechanism, a form of mechanical computer from 150 to 100 BC. Its design was quite advanced for when it was made, and it is known to most as the oldest known analog computer. This is a super fascinating wiki page, and I do suggest going to explore it for yourself if you have spare time. Learned helplessness is next. This one is just very sad. This is the behavior that a subject of a repeated aversive stimuli that is out of their control will display. The reason this wiki page is so disturbing and weird and sad is because it largely focuses on this experiment that was done in the 1960s on dogs that we would hopefully not do today. They wanted to test this behavioral phenomenon, so they used dogs as the subjects and they used shock tests in order to do it. And reading about it is just like, it's so sad. I did not like reading about that at all, so I won't go into the details. But if you're sensitive to that kind of stuff, I do not suggest going to the page. However, it is something you'd learn in like Psych 101. Let's talk about the human example that they did instead. So there was an experiment done on a group of people that had to perform mental tasks while there was this distracting, obnoxious noise like right in the room in their ear. One group of subjects had a switch where they could turn off this distracting noise, and the other group did not have a switch, so they had no control over the noise. Researchers found that the group in the experiment that had control, that had the switch to turn off the noise, rarely did so. And even when they chose not to turn off the noise, they still outperformed the other group. So just the awareness that they could turn off the noise if they wanted to was enough to make it far less bothersome to them. We see this a lot in classrooms as well, where students who keep failing on tests and other things, they may start to just believe that they don't have any sort of control over their scores and becoming more knowledgeable, and that they cannot improve no matter what they did. So their learned helplessness is a result, and it makes them not even try because they feel like there's nothing they can do to improve their scores. So the TLDR is that it's a behavioral tendency to just give up in a situation where you feel like you have no control. Everywhere at the End of Time is next. This is an over 6-hour album by an artist named The Caretaker, which was an alias for an English electronic musician named Leyland Kirby. It's a melancholy, very old-timey sounding album with like ballroom type music, but it's, got static and it's kind of glitchy. And it's one of the most disturbing albums ever made because listening to the album in its entirety is supposed to portray the progression of dementia. There's warnings that come with listening to the album, including the fact that the album can cause feelings of anxiety, depression, and extreme existential dread. I listened to some of it. The whole thing is on YouTube, and I can confirm it's pretty unsettling. However, I do think that it's a very beautiful piece of art, and I do like the way it brings awareness to the disease in kind of a creative, different way. Next is Demon Core. Not gonna lie, I was really afraid this was gonna be some kind of thing. Thankfully, it wasn't. The demon core is an object. It was a 14-pound mass of plutonium made by the USA during World War II. We were actually planning on using it as the third nuclear weapon to attack Japan, but Japan surrendered after the second nuclear attack, as we had taken out probably 200,000 of their people already. So they surrendered before we could nuke them a third time. So instead, they kept the mass at a facility for further testing. Scientists working with it started testing on the weapon. It's more complicated than this, so I'm going to describe it in super layman's terms. Basically, the scientists were testing how far you could push this mass before it was triggered to react. One of these scientists was Harry Dalion, who was messing with it alone one night when he should not have been. He accidentally dropped a brick of tungsten carbide right on it. It was enough for him to get a lethal dose of radiation poisoning. He died 25 days later. The following year, in 1946, another scientist named Louis Slotin did a similar experiment, except with a beryllium dome over the core, and again caused it to go supercritical for a tiny fraction of a second when the screwdriver he was using to keep a gap between the dome and the core slipped. He then got a lethal dose of radiation poisoning as well and passed away 9 days later. He had 7 other colleagues in the room with him at the time, but thankfully they were far enough away that they did not get the lethal dose. Harry and Louis knew each other, so when this happened to Louis, he remembers visiting Harry in the hospital to console him as he was passing away from his poisoning. And so once this happened, Louis knew exactly what was going to happen to him as well. If you're into science, you may be interested in reading the details about this. This was an extremely oversimplified explanation, as if there's any physicists watching out there. I doubt there's physicists watching my channel, but if there are, you know this was a very feeble explanation. It was called the Demon Core because of it killing these 2 scientists, and it was eventually melted down and the materials were used to recycle into other nuclear weapons. Homicidal Sleepwalking. This actually is not its own page. There is a section about this in the more broad sleepwalking wiki page. It's also exactly what it sounds like. It's pretty much a legal defense to use that you were sleepwalking when you killed somebody and therefore you were not aware of what you were doing and therefore you should not be at fault for it. For example, in 2008, a man named Brian Thomas killed his wife while he said he was having a dream that he was fighting off intruders. The judge found him not guilty in 2009. Belmez Faces. The Belmez Faces was an alleged paranormal phenomenon that was occurring in a house located in Spain, starting all the way back in 1971. Residents of the house would complain that there were these faces that were appearing in their concrete floors. The faces would supposedly appear but then disappear over time. Some believe that the owner of the house at the time had some special abilities and was subconsciously making these faces appear. Others say, of course, that it was all just a hoax orchestrated by the owner of the house for financial gain and notoriety. If the story is true, the story goes that they first saw this face in the concrete, they destroyed it at first because they were so afraid, but then the face just came back. And then more faces would form over the years. Again, we don't have time to go over all the details in this video, but there are a lot of fascinating theories about this and testing done on the faces to, determine if they were real or not. Some think that they were drawn on and others say that the testing proves they could not possibly have been drawn on. So, Overtoun Bridge. I also made a video about this when I was a baby YouTuber. This is a bridge in Scotland. It's super pretty, but a lot of people talk about how creepy it is due to the tendency of dogs to seemingly spontaneously jump off the bridge to their deaths. Many believe that it's a paranormal structure that is causing the dogs to want to commit S-word. The most prevailing theory, though, at least the most logical theory, is that the foliage below the bridge kind of makes it look like it's less far down than it is, and it also makes it look like a flat surface off the bridge. That, combined with the fact that there's mink squirrels, mice, and stuff in the area that are urinating everywhere, and the scent is very, very strong. It causes the dogs to go into a frenzy, and if they're not on a leash, they simply jump off, thinking it's not that far down, in pursuit of the creatures. Dancing Plague of 1518. We've talked about this one several times on my channel. It was also in the Strange Deaths iceberg, so I talked about it fairly recently. Many of us are familiar with this. I'm not going to go into super detail because, like I said, I've talked about it a lot. But in the year 1518, in the country that we now know as France, from July until September, so basically the summer of 1518, somewhere between 50 and 400 people danced in the streets for weeks at a time, some of them allegedly dancing until they literally died. However, there's not like a ton of proof that people were actually dropping dead. Logical explanations for it were possibly mass food poisoning in the area or mass hysteria. Skinwalker Ranch. I swear I did not make this iceberg myself, but this is yet another topic that I have also made its own video about very long time ago. Skinwalker Ranch is a ranch located in Ballard, Utah. It has the highest reports of just tons of weird paranormal and other strange activities. There's a lot of alleged UFO sightings there, various sightings of cryptids, lots and lots of ghost activity, and other just very strange things that owners of the ranch have claimed to have seen over the years. The ranch has been featured on Ancient Aliens as well as other TV shows. Skeptics, like myself, believe that it was just the Sherman family who lived in the house from 1994 to 1996. And they just made up these stories again for notoriety and to make the ranch famous, because the owners of the farm before the Sherman family, who owned the farm from 1934 until 1994, which was a full 60 years, claim that nothing scary or weird has ever happened to them there. Elephant's Foot. This one is scary as hell, but doesn't involve any elephants, thankfully. The Elephant's Foot is a mass of black corium. Corium is a lava-like substance that is created during a nuclear meltdown. The Elephant's Foot was formed during the Chernobyl disaster of April 1986, and it was found in December of that year. It is located underneath reactor number 4 under the Chernobyl power plant in Ukraine. Thankfully, its reactivity has decreased quite a bit over time, as it was extremely dangerous back when it was first found. It's also named the Elephant's Foot given its wrinkly appearance, which I think is pretty cool. Also, photos of this thing are just bananas. Miracle Village. This is another one that I was just like, I had never heard of, and this is not what I was expecting it to be. Get this. Miracle Village is an area in very rural Florida. It's surrounded by sugarcane fields, pretty much in the middle of what most people would describe the middle of nowhere. Tourists don't go there, and the reason it's there is because it's a quote-unquote haven for registered offenders. It has 54 duplexes and 6 houses. It's owned by a religious group to offer post-prison care. It is the largest community of registered sex offenders in the US. They do not discriminate based on your religion. Like, it is a religious group that owns it, but even if you're atheist, you're allowed in. They do not allow those that have been convicted of serial crimes or violent crimes. Now, I am definitely by no means defending sex offenders by any stretch of the imagination, but I do want to remind everybody of the tiny infractions that you can get and you can become a registered SO. Public urination, for example, can get you this status. So can hugging someone without their consent. So can things like indecent exposure, or things like exposing a child to adult things on your computer, but it was by accident, like you accidentally left the page open or something like that. That can get you as a registered SO. I'm not saying any of those things are good things to do. I'm just making the point that not every single registered SO is an R-worder. For example, one of the residents of this community admits that he was charged because he had a girlfriend that was 16 and he was 18. He was going on 19, but he was 18 and the parents got involved. Either way, had no idea that this existed. You may also be curious as to why why they specifically go here or someplace that is only for people like this. And that is because there are strict laws for registered SOs, which I mean makes sense and I think is a good thing, but like not allowed to live near schools, not allowed to live in certain areas. They're often registered as that online so people in their neighborhood can see their status, stuff like that. So it's hard for them to find housing in the first place. So they go places like this. Jenkem. This is a wiki page all about the street drug that is made with fermented human waste. People take both urine and feces or stuff from the sewer, they put them in a bag and they ferment them over time, and then inhaling the fumes turns them into a hallucinogen, supposedly. It is something that is reportedly more common in other countries that are less developed because it's an extremely cheap drug to make and it's an easy drug to get. However, it's kind of been called into question, like some of the how true the reports on it are, especially because there was this rumor that it was becoming widespread in the US, and that overall seemed to be exaggerated. Annora Petrova is next. This is such a good one. This is one of my favorite internet urban legends. This is a very infamous creepypasta story, one of the most popular out there. It's one of my favorites. I do definitely encourage you to read it on your own time. I'm not going to read the whole thing here because this is not an Annora Petrova video, but I will try to remember to link it below. The story is about a woman named Annora Petrova. She's a competitive ice skater. She finds a Wikipedia page about herself that she finds is starting to predict the future. The whole story is an email format of Annora talking to her friend Bree, and things get very, very dark and very, very creepy. So this is not a real Wikipedia page. It's a page that somebody made based on this urban legend. However, of course, some people on the internet will tell you that it was a real wiki page that got eventually deleted. Tyke. This one I'm not gonna go into detail about because this one is an animal, specifically an elephant, and this is just another one of those. It's a page on how humans kidnapped an elephant that never should have been kidnapped from its natural habitat, and then when it ended up acting accordingly, we brutally killed it. Like, I'm so sick of those stories. I hate them so much. I'm gonna let you guys research that one on your own if you really want to know. Broadcast signal intrusion is the second to the last one on this tier. Broadcast signal intrusion is the hijacking of TV and radio station that happens from time to time. The most well-known example that everybody in my audience is probably familiar with, or at least most of you are, is the Max Headroom incident. This again is a very infamous internet mystery. It took place on November 22nd, 1987, a man wearing a Max Headroom mask interrupted the regular TV program twice in one night. The perpetrator or perpetrators have never been found and never been identified. Another example is that in June of 2017, a local radio station in the United Kingdom had its signal intruded on 8 times, and the song The Winker Song was played. This perpetrator has also never been identified. Most recently, the famous hacker group Anonymous also just hacked into Russia just last year in 2022. Those are just some of the many examples of the hijackings that have happened throughout the years. Okay, and last but certainly not least, we are going to talk about Forbidden Wiki. This is again technically not its own Wikipedia page. It's a post from Reddit No Sleep. It's called How to Access the Forbidden Wiki. It's a post from user named Mr. Outlaw, and it was posted in June of 2019. It currently has 5.1 thousand upvotes on Reddit, so it pretty much went viral. If you're not familiar, r/no sleep is a subreddit that is, I mean, for lack of a better explanation, it's basically Reddit creepypastas. People write fictional stories on No Sleep, however, of course, claiming that they're true. They're, again, stories that get passed around until they turn into internet urban legends. Nobody on Reddit No Sleep ever breaks immersion or character, I would say. Like, they don't call things fake or anything. They comment as if the story is real, and I really like that about this page because, again, it like keeps everybody immersive, and it's just a fun game. So anyway, I'm not going to read this one also word for word because it could again be its own video. It's kind of a long story. However, I am going to explain the steps of this challenge / game. The game is, as the title suggests, how to access this section of Wikipedia that nobody's supposed to access. I will also have the full post linked down below if anybody wants to go read the full story. So step number 1 is to delete all photos, any SIM cards, any contacts, everything off of your phone or your device. Completely wipe it clean. Then go to a public place with Wi-Fi. It's highly suggested that you go to the library, a coffee shop, a university campus, somewhere like that with good Wi-Fi. This is highly recommended but not required, but it is definitely not recommended that you go on a private Wi-Fi or stay at where you live or anything like that. Make sure you have a weapon, a vehicle, and or a bodyguard. Once you're at the coffee shop, open Wikipedia and go to a very, very well-known common page, such as Elon Musk, Google, World War II, etc. Very well known, something that everybody has heard of. Navigate from this popular page to an obscure page, like no one has heard of it, obscure. Nothing that would be on this list or on this iceberg, because you could Google what are creepy wiki articles. Like the example used in the story is finding a Romanian folk singer from the 60s that has only released 2 songs and then died in their 30s. That has a wiki page, but like if you asked anybody, they'd have no idea what you're talking about. That part's very important. I think you are supposed to use hyperlinks from the original page to navigate to this page, just like the Hitler game that we talked about in Tier 1. Next, after you find this obscure page, click the Wikipedia homepage, go back to the homepage, and repeat this process 3 to 5 times. Doing these steps, after you've repeated it a few times, you're suddenly going to get a blank page. It's going to have the wiki logo in the corner. It's going to have those side navigation links on the left side, but no text and no photos. There is going to be a title that says information limit, followed by a string of numbers. You need to memorize those numbers. Memorize the numbers and then do not close the browser, but you will now need to leave that Wi-Fi location with your phone or tablet or laptop, whatever it is you used. Now you need to go to a remote location with absolutely no signal, not just any place where you can turn off or go into airplane mode, like in the middle of the forest, where even if you tried, you could not get a signal or LTE. Once you're there, look back down at your device and click refresh on the information limit page that you left on. In spite of the fact that there's no way to connect to Wi-Fi or anything where you are, a new page will open anyway, and it will say enter access point and nothing else. You have to then enter the string of numbers that you just memorized on the information limit page, except for the last 2 digits. OP stresses that this is very important. If you put in the whole string of numbers, something very bad will happen to you. After you type in that string, you're going to be sent what looks like the Wikipedia homepage yet again, except the page will be off. Like the logo will be just slightly off. It'll be the wrong color or the slightly wrong text. It'll just look a tiny bit different. Nobody knows exactly what this page is, but a lot of people just refer to it as Forbidden Wiki. You're there. Now, another important note is that if you get to Forbidden Wiki and suddenly the language has changed, so you started in English at the coffee shop, but now it is turned to French, something like that. If it is turned into a language that you did not originally access the Forbidden Wiki with, close everything immediately and go home. Your mission is over. You cannot continue with the ritual. The game is done for you, because if you don't, something worse will happen to you, even worse than if you put in the whole string of numbers. Because if you keep going, photos are going to start to pop up that nobody on this realm or in this world should ever see, and something bad will happen to you if you do see them. If it is in the same language that you started with, then you're set. you're free to start exploring Forbidden Wiki. It's full of pages that are not from our world, and basically pages of information that no one on this earth is supposed to know. OP also stresses to never linger more than about a minute on each page, and don't look at more than about 15 different pages per session. After then, you just kind of want to quit while you're ahead and go home. There's this group that is just referred to as them, or they will know that you're looking at all this stuff, even if you're just skimming it. But as long as you're not looking at it for more than about a minute, they don't care and they won't come after you, because simply looking at it for just a minute and skimming the page is not going to give you a real understanding of the concept anyway. So they don't care about that much. If you're staying on it too long, not only are they tracking you, but they don't want you to know that information in depth, and they will come after you, and that's it. They'll kill you. It's implied that they'll kill you, and there's nothing you can do. You can't fight them. They're too powerful. So the reason you brought a weapon, a vehicle, and a bodyguard, or some combination of those, or at least one of those, is for the group called the Lurkers. These are not the group of them. They're not that powerful, but they're another group that we don't know exactly who they are, but they also do not want you to be looking at these things. And they could appear out of nowhere. They could fall from a tree right next to you, climb out of the lake that you're near, some creepy shit like that, and they will also try to fight you. However, they are not as strong as them, so if you're really determined to keep looking on Forbidden Wiki, you could try to fight them off. If you don't want to fight them off, or they do seem to be way more powerful than you and your weapon, the best thing to do is just drop your device where it is, like close the browser, drop the device where it is, and run away, go home, because the Lurkers, as long as you don't have the device with Forbidden Wiki, they don't care that much. It's likely that they won't chase after you. So those are the rules. The best part about this story is that the OP gives us some examples of some of the pages that he has read. I'm going to read again just a few of them. I'm not going to go over all of them. It's a pretty long list. But for example, the Great Lakes Incident. The Great Lakes Incident was a naval battle that took place across all 5 Great Lakes on the Canadian-US border from 2007 to 2011. Reports about a mysterious ship rising out of the water alerted Canadian authorities in late 2010. The belligerents were of an unusual nature, able to withstand conventional weaponry, possessing multiple heads, considered in between amphibian and humanoid, finally resolved using firebombs and chemical weapons. The Grand Canyon Void. The Grand Canyon Void is a hole in the ground in northwest Arizona, measuring approximately 4.6 meters in diameter. Hikers reported staring into the hole for hours on end before they were dragged away from it by park authorities. An average of 12 hikers were reported to have jumped into it during the month of March, with their bodies turning up in different countries. Mr. Dream. Mr. Dream is an Australian DJ from Perth. His self-proclaimed style is known as Infernal Trance. People at his live shows have been reported to experience moments of incredible euphoria before disemboweling each other in the crowd. The manhunt is ongoing, with the latest show reported to have occurred in June 2019, an underground venue in Paris. Channel 51 News. Channel 51 News is a controversial news station that broadcasts on Channel 51 between 3 and 4 a.m. The reports presented on the program have been considered nonsensical and disturbing to the viewers watching. Sometimes the hosts have reported incidents that have not occurred up until that point, only for these incidents to transpire 1 week after, as was the case with the Tokyo Massacre. The location the channel broadcasts out of remains impossible to pinpoint. The Man Inside Your Head. The Man Inside Your Head is an arcane entity that exists within your subconscious. His intentions are malicious, and a good portion of your mental capacity is used to suppress him from escaping at any given time. Don't let him escape. The corner of your basement. The corner of your basement is that one dark spot in your basement tucked away in that far corner. No matter how much light you shine on it, it'll never illuminate, and you'll never know what's lurking within it. You better figure out what it is soon. The Snowstorm Angel is a figure that you see in your background during heavy snowstorms. You'll think your eyes are playing a trick on you, and that your senses are somehow being distorted by the snowfall, but make no mistake, mistake. It's there. People often assume its nature is to be benevolent given its name. That assumption is incorrect. The eye in the sky. The eye in the sky is a large eye measuring approximately 4,400 meters in diameter that appears in the sky every so often, usually during violent storms. When it appears, it is advised not to look at it under any circumstances. The only exception to this rule is for those who have been forsaken and absolutely need to. You'll know if you need to. Throughout the post, the OP gives a lot of warnings to us not to do this game, not to partake in this game, and that they kind of gave these instructions because if you look for these same instructions elsewhere on the internet, sometimes the instructions don't come with the proper warnings. And so he wanted to put instructions out there that did come with proper warnings. The ending of this story is epic. It says, I stumbled upon a particular page the last time I paid a visit to the site. This was the page that ruined everything. The title was simply a phone number that contained my area code. Here was the description. I remember this one verbatim. Phone number is a number that will be calling you in a few days. You will be obligated to answer his call and follow his instructions. If you refuse, he will come to you. You will only have 2 chances. Here's the thing. I live in an apartment, so I don't have a basement. I'm pretty sure there's no demonic entity living inside my head. I've never seen a giant eye in the sky. I'm from the South, so snowfall is rare and sparse at best. Up until this point, the shit I've seen on the Wiki had been 100% separate and disconnected from my real life. I really thought I had no cause for concern. But I did get a call from a number I really hoped I wouldn't see again. I let it ring through without picking up. One last chance. Like I said, I will link this whole thing down below if you do want to read the entire story. That was a summary, but there's a lot more details in there that are really fun to read. All right, guys, that is going to be it for today's video. Please like the video just to help the channel out, and I will see you all next week. Thank you so much to all of our patrons. Top tier shout outs are Colin Holmes, The Deck of Cards, Michelle Valdovinos, Tom L, Little Kittle Cat, Mitchell Schaefer-Meyer, Mike, Alice Paul, Brittany Phillips, Willow Winchester, Bambi, Momo Neon, Philip J, Marita 144, Sage K, Literally Lacey, Elderly Hipster, Reese Rolls, The Puppy Hag, Headless Fancy, Toby, Carter, Kawakon Anime and Gaming Convention, Sonder, Sarah the Crazy Fish Lady, Blood for the Koi, Larkvar, Maxie, Ashley Danielle, and Give Me a Kiss.